welcome back for another episode of Cheer New York,
My Black Experience.
My name is Matthew Brown, and this is
Abby Jones Corbin.
and we are part of the athletics department of Cheer New York. And today with us, we have the lovely Tiffany.
Woo!
Hello.
Hi, Tiff. Introduce yourself.
I'm Tiffany Lynch. I've been on the team for about 4 years, and I love it. I was a back spot, and then I recently transitioned to crown to do more dancing and less stunting, and I love that too.
Sorry, that's my side.
Yep, your side of the room.
I went to Abby's side of the room. That was fun.
The cool kids.
The cool kids. Sorry.
Yeah.
All right.
So let's get started. So Tiffany, how did you get started in cheerleading?
I started in middle school. My public middle school had a cheerleading team, and I was really interested. So I tried out in 7th grade and I didn't make it, but I was very determined. So I had my friends who did make the team teach me cheers and give me tips so that I could try out again in 8th grade, and I made it, and I was so happy.
Perseverance.
Yeah, it was a big transfer. 7th grade, I wasn't even close to making it, and then 8th grade, I made it. And then I cheered in high school, and that was it. I didn't cheer after high school until I came to Cheer New York.
Can you tell us where you grew up? Where you're from?
Yeah, in Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, you know everything. I didn't know anything.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. All right. So how has your experience in cheerleading been? Now, of course, you said you did middle school, high school, you skipped that college, and now with adults. So how is your experience with, cheerleading or the industry been?
It's been good. It's been really positive. I think probably when I was in middle school, I was getting into it for the wrong reasons. I just wanted to, prove myself in that way that I was normal and cool, and we wore uniforms to school on game days, and so that was my main motivation. I was I
You wanted to wear that uniform on game days.
I want to wear the uniform on game
On Wednesdays we wear it,
I
right?
felt amazing. I was in the movies when I was in middle school in my cheerleading uniform at school. So I think I got into it for probably not great reasons, but what I got out of it was so positive. I developed so much confidence, and it's how I made so many of my friends. And it was really good for me, and it was athletic. I mean, I'm not super into sports outside of cheerleading. So I think if it hadn't been for cheerleading, I would have had a pretty sedentary life. I wasn't really into anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good that it got me active and healthy. And so it's been super positive. And Cheer New York was the same way, just better than I could have asked for, and really exceeded my expectations as far as how positive it was and what I've gotten out of it. So I don't really have anything bad to say about cheerleading. Cheerleading in general.
Cheerleading in general.
Yeah,
So,
I'm a big fan.
Have you ever had moments where you felt like you had to put your Blackness on hold?
Yeah, in cheerleading.
In cheerleading in general, in life, in wherever. We can start with cheerleading and then.
Definitely. I mean, it was hard in middle school. There was one other Black girl on the team, and then same in high school. And actually it was in both cases, another half Black, half white girl like me. So I definitely, felt a little bit I just really wanted to blend in. And like I said, especially in middle school, that's why I got into it in the first place, just to sort of blend in and make friends. And so, yes, I think in that effort to blend in, I definitely put my Blackness on hold. And when I look back too, I think it's interesting that me and the other Black girl in both cases weren't really close at all. And I think it's because we were both trying to fit in, and so not wanting to point out that we were different by hanging out together or being friends. So for sure, lots of times.
So that segues right into how does your race then, how does your race tie into other parts of your identity? Like, does it, how do you identify? How does, how do you put it out there if you do?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that first of all, that my racial identity is complicated, just being mixed race and particularly being mixed with white
Mhm.
and having been raised by my white parent. I think it's just complicated on its own. And even now at 34 years old, I still am like sort of balancing and figuring that out, how much like privilege I have from my white side, how many challenges I have from being Black. So I think that's complicated. And then on top of that, being a woman, and thinking too of like growing up in middle school and high school, I think the combination of feeling insecure as a girl and then feeling insecure as like being different racially, definitely came together to make me an overall very insecure person up until adulthood.
Were you the only child?
I have a sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you talk to her about this, or is she older or younger?
Yeah, she's younger. She's 3 years younger, and we're really close. So definitely, I mean, until I moved to New York and it's a more diverse environment, she was the only person I ever had really talked to about our racial identity, because I didn't know anybody else that had the same.
So growing up, being that you are of mixed race, you grew up with you were raised by your white mother. So friend-wise, were majority of your friends other mixed kids, or were the majority white kids or Black kids? Were there any other outlets that you had to explore the Black side of you?
Not really. I mean, Phoenix, I guess, doesn't have very many Black people. Like it must not, at least where I was living. It was very much like Latinx and white people, and those groups were really segregated. Even in my high school, it was like almost like two different high schools of like white kids and Latinx kids, and they didn't really mix. So I definitely had more white friends, and basically like all white friends growing up. There were these kids that my mom, I'm pretty sure we met them at the mall or something, and they were also mixed, but their mom was Mexican and their dad was Black. And so she kind of like went up to them and introduced us, and we would have some play dates and things with them, but they were boys and they didn't live that close to us. But my mom did make that effort, like to try to have us make those connections. But where we lived, it didn't really have like that type of diversity.
Right. And what about when you went to college? What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I went to college in Arizona, but still there was like people from all over, and even all over the state. So there were Black people there. And it was interesting. I think initially like my freshman year, I more gravitated toward the same friends that I had in high school, which were like very much like blonde cheerleader type girls, but then sort of branched out in later years. And it was a good experience, even just like having classes with people and the one big difference from having that diversity in college was that in high school, I always felt that I was very ugly, like very unattractive. No one ever asked me out. I never had a date. I never had any interests like that. And so I just sort of determined from that, like, oh, I must be like not very attractive. And then when I went to college and there were more like Black guys around and I started getting asked out, I was like, oh, I think it was just that like actors weren't into me because I'm brown. So that was the biggest difference for me right away when I got there, of like, oh, whoa, like different, like Black people do respond to me differently than my white peers have. So that was nice.
So that was an experience, but is that possibly the first time you couldn't have been acknowledged your race? Like when did you realize amongst yourself? I know you kept saying that you were different,
Right.
You knew that something was different. But when did you acknowledge that you were Black? That part of you was Black, even that was the difference.
Yeah, I definitely acknowledged it, and like my mom, would talk to us about it, and we did know our dad, even though we didn't live with him. So I acknowledged it, but I acknowledged it more as in like jokes or like putting myself down when I was in high school. And when I look back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so bad. Like the jokes that people would make or that I would make or just like go along with. So I did acknowledge it. Like I felt like I couldn't really deny it. And my hair was one thing, and cheerleading where like I couldn't do, we're going to competition and you have like a very specific hairstyle it's gonna do. I couldn't do it, and it was like obvious, that my mom wouldn't let me straighten my hair. My hair is really hard to straighten anyways without being relaxed, and that wasn't going to happen. So it just wasn't possible. And so I definitely acknowledged it, but not in like a wholehearted, positive sort of way. Just like,
so
like
jokes at that time in your life, how did you identify racially?
As mixed.
As mixed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering because without having, like you said, even though you knew your father, without having that full influence there, and especially as a teenager, because kids are mean.
Yeah. As you said, even though you made some jokes, of course they made jokes, and I don't know, I can't say, probably as a defense mechanism, kind of sort of was like, okay, I'm gonna go along with this, like this is, but where was that person and that influence to say that's not a good thing to let me talk to you about it, let me explain. Do you know it at you're saying now, maybe as an adult, as in college, it became more forward, in your face, like maybe that's not a good way to look at this? Maybe.
Yeah, it really was not. I mean, it's like sad to say, but I didn't have anybody like that growing up. I didn't have Black friends or teachers. Yeah, not until college. Like literally, I didn't even really understand racism until college. Like I just thought racism was like if you're, hurting people because of their race, or like violence. Like I didn't understand anything else as part of racism or like a racist system until I got to college and took classes on it and realized like how complicated it is. But until that point, I was like, oh no, the people I grew up with weren't racist.
Well, I mean, I have to think back to my history. Arizona did not, and I don't know if it does now, did not even acknowledge Martin Luther King's holiday.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even like that could have been an added, like, oh, I mean, if you think about Arizona, that's what I think of. It's not, it's not in the forefront of, ooh, Black power.
No.
Let's teach, Black history or have an outlet, it just isn't.
So for our viewers, you guys, Tiffany is an educator. She's a teacher. Thank you so much. So does that play a part in, because you, as an adult now, I'm sure you acknowledge the things that you missed out on that side of being a Black woman. So now being a Black woman that is an educator, does that influence you in any way in how you educate your students and the things that you make sure that they learn and know and you try to instill in them?
Yeah, absolutely. Like in a huge way. One, I'm just happy to like be there. Like, obviously I want to be the best teacher I can be, but I also know that it's important just to have teachers who like look like you or have a similar experience, because I never had that. And definitely, so I teach middle school and I teach them I teach English right now. So it's more through literature, but we talk about history and racism and social class and all these things. And I tell them a lot of the times when certain topics come up, like I didn't learn about this until college, or some people will never learn about this. So like, it's really important, and it's really awesome that you guys are like listening and understanding when you're in 7th grade. So definitely, and I try to make sure that we're reading diverse books, because that's something that I don't remember experiencing, and leaving room to have conversations, so that it's not just, and I remind them of that all the time too, like even though we try to be neutral as teachers, I'm like, I know you know what I think about some things, like you know what I think about racism, like we're reading this book about integration, and like, but at the same time, I'm still happy I don't want to just hear you repeat what I say. Like, if you have a question, I mean, they're 12 and 13 years old. So I'm like, nothing that you say is going to offend me or upset me, really, as long as you're being genuine and that's really what you think, or a real question that you have. So I try to leave it open too, because I also didn't feel like that in school. I felt like I was just trying to remember what the teacher said, and whatever the teacher said was right. And so I try to make it more like genuine discussion and open.
Space for you to grow and them to grow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So in all of this, have you had an experience with prejudice because of your race? I know probably as a woman, yes.
Yeah.
But the fact that you are of mixed race, has that ever come into play where you know that you were on the prejudicial end?
Yeah. So since we're talking about when I was like middle school and high school, it has me thinking about then, and even before in elementary school. So we moved to Arizona from California when I was in 6th grade. And when we were in California, my sister and I were then it was very into like tracking in public schools. So it was like, we were in the, advanced placement, like gifted and talented, whatever, that I think they don't do anymore, which is probably for the best. But we were on like in those classes. And then when we came to Arizona, they put us in the low classes, because they had kind of like low, medium, high. And my mom tried to tell them like, oh, they're supposed to be in the higher classes. And they were like, no, they're not, like, it's fine. And then eventually by like 8th grade, I myself was like, I don't want to be in these classes. Like, I've already done all this stuff, and got one teacher to talk to the office so I could take the test, whatever. But then my best friend growing up, her and her siblings, they're beautiful, blonde hair, blue-eyed people. And when we talk about it, they went to the same elementary school. They're like, that's so funny, because they put us in the advanced classes, and we had no idea like what was going on. Like they were like, we had no business being in those classes. Like, we're not a very academic family. But when you looked at it, they had put like all the white kids into the advanced classes and everybody else into the low classes. So, and that's something that could, potentially really affect someone's life, like being and being tracked inappropriately too. And the interesting thing with having like both of our experiences is they said like they were fighting to get out of them, because they were like, this is so hard. And like,
you had to fight to get in.
Right. And they were like, no, you'll be fine, because they just looked smarter than them.
Yes, because you're Black, you weren't going to be as smart.
Right. So luckily I don't have like a ton of specific things. I mean, also I can think of like really horrible things people have said to me in high school and college. And like I said, I didn't realize, maybe luckily, until later on, like how bad it really was to make jokes like that or like say stuff like that to people. But that I find more, I don't know, it's less than the like placement of the classes to me, because it was individual. Like I would have the option to just be like, okay, I don't want to talk to that person anymore because they're saying these horrible things to me. But when it's the school that's discriminating,
when it's education, it's a whole other animal.
Yes,
that I think is a big problem.
Yeah,
that makes it a lot worse.
Yeah,
because as you said, that can sway your trajectory of where you get to go
in life.
Yes. Absolutely. I know my mother fought, got me bused, moved, made sure I was, in the class I was supposed to be in, and all of that, because she knew that that's one of the stepping stones,
Yeah.
So who would you say has inspired you to be proud of who you are in your racial identity?
So I did, once I moved to New York, then I did start to meet people like those role models and people. I think in Arizona, some of my professors as women, I really looked up to, and that was nice, but they were white women. So once I moved to New York and met more people here and made more friends, like a lot of them inspired me. And then I still work at a private school. And so the first few years that I was there, like they send people to conferences, and I was like, oh, I'll go. I've never done that before. And I went to the People of Color conference, which is all educators of color. And that was the first time I was like really, really inspired by people. And they had, because it's a big conference, I don't know how many people are there, but like thousands, they do affinity groups, and they can do them more specifically. So they had a mixed race affinity group. And so going to that at the end of the day was really inspiring and empowering to actually talk to people. Like a lot of those experiences, like we were saying, they were missing when I was younger, then I feel like got filled in, like talking to people who had really similar experiences. So that was fantastic.
So how does that make you feel that, because I'm sure you feel some type of difference there, knowing that these spaces for you didn't get filled in until you were pretty much an adult, versus others of us who, we've had these experiences since we were children. How does that make you feel? Like, how does that, in your mind, like what's going on there, especially with the state that the world is in today, with Black Lives Matter, all of that stuff? How does that make you feel?
I think it mostly just makes me feel motivated to be that person for kids if I can, because I can't go back and change anything, but like I can just change now and be there for my students and develop like close relationships with the kids who need it, and talk openly about my race and my experience. And so I think that that's how it motivates me, and also recognizing the importance of that for my kids and wanting to make sure that they do have more of a diverse experience and more like people to look to, like you said, as role models or inspirations. So yeah, I'm not really one to dwell on the past. Like it doesn't really make me feel sad necessarily, because obviously it worked out okay, and it would have been better, yes, to have those experiences earlier, but I'm still grateful to have had them in my 20s. And I know that there's people, maybe in Phoenix or wherever, who might never have those connections and experiences. And so I'm grateful that I got them at some point.
Whenever the representation comes, whenever it comes, it still comes, it's still there. Experiences daily as we learn at every, like most educators say, you are always learning, always learning, always teaching, always sharing experience. So, it may happen later in life for some, but
as long as it happens.
It happens. Oh, wow.
So when was the first time that you experienced joy in your race?
I would say at the first People of Color conference, in the multiracial affinity group, like that was one of the just biggest experiences of my life, honestly. Like I said, I didn't really realize or think about the fact that before that, my sister was the only person that I knew that could relate on any of these experiences. And even though this group was also people of all different types of mixes, so it wasn't all people with a Black parent and a white parent, there was still so much to connect on, especially with the people who did have a white parent and a parent of color. Like it meant the world to me to hear. I was crying like the whole time, just to hear other people, say the experiences that they'd had that were like exactly the same. And
they understood.
Yeah. and I hadn't had that before. And there was some serious conversations, and then they do breakoffs where we could have like more fun conversations. So it'd be like a group to go talk about dating, or a group to talk about hair, or and so that was just so awesome for me to be able to talk to people who understood what I was talking about. And I felt
hair
very
conversation.
We just can't get
past that hair. I swear.
It always comes up. We know you went on a serious hair.
You
journey.
went on a serious hair journey. We were a part watching you go through.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
know. I mean,
you were beautiful in all of it.
Yes.
Letting you know that.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
regardless of what those high school kids missed out on, those high school boys missed out on.
They definitely missed out.
They missed out. I'm just letting you know that now.
I see it that way now too. At the time, I was just like, I was always so confused. And like one thing that would happen is that part of it not being diverse was that like my sister and I were the only people that a lot of people had ever seen that like looked like us. So like if we'd be in the grocery store and like old white ladies would come up to us and be like, you know, you're so beautiful, like where are you from, what, like constantly. And it just made me feel crazy, because I'd be like, how come old people keep telling me that I'm beautiful, but nobody that is my age thinks that I'm beautiful? Like, are the old people lying to me? Like, I don't.
What did they see? What's wrong with it? No,
like,
I just think the
so
young people just didn't. They just didn't have any. They just didn't know better.
Right.
Yeah.
Young people just didn't know better.
I think and I was the same. Everybody just was attracted to whatever we were seeing on TV. And,
right.
You know, the more that someone looked like Britney Spears, the more that they were attractive.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And
yes.
you were, and to you were exotic.
You were exotic. That's
exotic.
That's the word. That's what you were exotic because you were different.
Definitely.
That's the word for different is exotic. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Got you. So how do you showcase your pride in present day now?
I think with my students as much as I can. And like I said, speaking like openly about what my racial identity is and how it's affected my life. I think that my hair has been a big thing, even though it's a small thing in a way. It has sort of been a symbol for where I am with my acceptance of my racial identity or my pride. And so I think that's one way that I show it. Although now I feel like I'm at a point where I could straighten my hair and it would be fine. Like when my hair is longer, maybe I will straighten it, because now I feel like it's genuinely like a choice, a style that I might want to do. Whereas before I felt like it just had to be that way or else. Like I couldn't leave my house if my hair wasn't straightened. I would freak out and go home. Like it was really not something that I was choosing for myself based on style. It was something that I felt like
that's empowering. A lot of women don't understand how empowering that is to accept and say it's my choice now, how I choose to wear it this day, if I choose to wear it, so forth and so on. It's very empowering. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. So, Tiff, can you give us one word, just one, to describe or express your Black girl magic?
Okay, let me think. I should have thought about this more before. To describe or express my Black girl magic, I would say probably just like powerful, like
that's it, right? Hey, powerful.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel so much more powerful now than when I was younger and I was trying to like suppress my Black girl magic. And so I think just really in accepting it, like it makes me feel powerful, and I don't care if other people really like it or not. And it's awesome that some people do like it. Some people think like, that's amazing, your hair is amazing, like that's so cool. And if other people don't, it doesn't faze me.
I wanted to
yeah, it makes me feel powerful.
What'd you want to say? Oh, he wanted to cuss them.
Yeah, yeah.
Just them. Blank them.
Blank them. Yes.
I got it.
She's a teacher. She can't say those things.
I can't.
Her students might watch.
Yeah, that's true. She doesn't talk like that, you guys. She doesn't.
We do. She doesn't.
Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining us. It was great having this conversation with you.
Very wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, learning so much more about you, even though we know you, but it's always great to have these conversations to learn even more about you and your experience and what life has been like for you as a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for listening, and thanks for doing this. I've really enjoyed the other episodes as well.
All right.
Yes, and guys, yes, so make sure you all are watching. Go back and watch all the past episodes. Follow Cheer New York on Instagram, Facebook, visit our YouTube page, all that great stuff. And we will see you back here next time for another episode of
Cheer New York, My Black Experience.